to Webinar Wednesdays. We're really excited to hear you speak, and I just can't wait to hear what you have to say about the tactics you all took in putting together Leaving a Legacy magazine.
Thank you, Bethany, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you. Today I get to talk about one of my favorite projects and share some insights and tips about the planning that contributed to its success. My team and I created our Leaving a Legacy magazine as a capstone to a unique communications effort that spanned 11 years. I was the Communications and Stakeholder Relations Manager for a statewide bridge program for the Oregon Department of Transportation. My pre-ODOT background is in magazine publishing, so it was a treat to return to those roots in developing and producing this publication. We couldn't be more proud of the results, and it was gratifying to be recognized with the Blue Pencil and Gold Screen Award from NAGC last year, first place in the Special Purpose Publication category. Today I'll share with you what we set out to do and how we went about achieving it. I hope it inspires you not only in terms of planning your communications, but also in trying some new approaches. Here's a summary of what I'll be covering today. First, some context about our program. I'll talk about how planning played a key role throughout our project stages and how it helped us to be successful. I'll point out a few learnings along the way, and then end with some takeaways that you can draw on as you plan your own communications projects. And as Bethany said, I encourage you to please ask questions or make comments as we go. As much as we can make this a discussion today, the better. So before we get started, I'd like to make a key point. Yes, our program was large in scope, time frame, and budget, as I'll detail in a moment. And yes, we had consultants augmenting our state DOT staff, although our core communications team was relatively small. But the approach we took is absolutely scalable, meaning it will work for any size project. Strategic planning applies to any effort, big or small or in between, straightforward or complex, large staff or a little team. A carefully crafted plan, well thought out goals, and the ability to be flexible when required are always applicable. And taking a visual, narrative approach to reports and other communications materials is not limited by project size or available budget or the number of your staff. First, I'll give an overview of the program to put our magazine project in context. So in 2002, hundreds of bridges across Oregon were showing their age, affecting not only safety, but also the state's economy. As in many other states, Oregon's highways were built in the 1950s and 60s as part of the federal interstate system. By the early 2000s, many of the bridges were nearing the end of their design lives. Oregon inspectors then discovered that a number of those bridges around the state, built during that period, were exhibiting cracking. Many at-risk bridges would soon need to be restricted to heavy vehicles, and the disruption to freight hauling would have a big negative impact on Oregon's economy. In 2003, the potential cost to Oregon's economy was estimated at $123 billion in lost production and 88,000 lost jobs in the next 25 years if the state's highway bridges were not updated. Without bridge program funding, weight limits on Oregon's aging bridges would have become common. So in July of that year, with the passage of the third Oregon Transportation Investment Act, known as OTIA 3, our legislature dedicated funding to address this statewide problem. With an allocation of $1.3 billion, ODOT created the OTIA 3 State Bridge Delivery Program. It was the largest investment in highway and bridge construction in Oregon in 50 years, since the building of the interstate system. There were 365 bridges statewide in the OTIA 3 Bridge Program. After additional evaluations, immediate repair or replacement was not required for 94 of those bridges. In just more than a decade, from 2004 to 2015, the bridge program completed work on 271 bridges across the state. 149 bridges were replaced, and 122 bridges were repaired. Bridges located near each other were grouped together or bundled into contracts of different sizes. The program's 87 construction bundles are represented here on this map. The Bridge program was unique from the beginning. It included legislative mandates to meet specific accountabilities, such as outsourcing the work, keeping traffic moving on key freight routes, and creating jobs for Oregon companies and workers. The size, scope, and complexity of the program required and allowed ODOT to do things differently. To meet these legislative requirements, ODOT established 5 goals for the Bridge program, and my team built our communication strategy around those goals in all of our reporting and messaging. Goal number 1 was to stimulate Oregon's economy by contracting with Oregon businesses and creating jobs. Second was to employ efficient and cost-effective practices. Third was to maintain freight mobility and keep traffic moving. Fourth was to build projects sensitive to communities and landscapes. This stewardship included environmental considerations and involving stakeholders in the decision-making process. And last, capitalize on funding opportunities to extend the program's reach without the need for additional state investments. The scope and compressed timetable of the program required participants to work cooperatively and think creatively. Such conditions spurred numerous innovations in delivery, and that innovation carried through to our communications program. Our team built on previous methods and models developed by ODOT, refining and adapting what had worked for long-term projects to ensure it would meet the needs of a multi-year program with projects located around the state. Complex projects required robust public engagement. Our team developed a 3-tiered assessment to determine the type and extent of public engagement required based on the complexity of the project, the number of stakeholders, and how directly or dramatically they would be affected by construction. ODOT has incorporated this approach beyond the Bridge program, and it continues to serve us well in determining what level of outreach is appropriate and cost-effective. We also work closely with communities. For example, interactive school programs involved students in our projects. These unique activities have proven to be valuable ways to inform both children and adults about ODOT's work, especially in tight-knit rural communities. And we partnered with Oregon's tribes to address their concerns and encourage participation. Over the years, we broke new ground for the agency in a number of areas, particularly in social media, to keep citizens involved and informed. For the program's largest and most complex project, our communications team pioneered several channels of social media for ODOT, including a blog, a virtual open house, Twitter posts, and a YouTube series called Behind the Orange Cones. We paved the way for these new techniques of engagement by establishing protocols for their use by department staff and beta testing the logistics. We also produced a monthly progress report for the entirety of the program, 123 reports in total, for stakeholders and the public. It served as the single definitive source of information for the Bridge program. It included graphics showing progress on goals, financial information, schedule data, and of course design and construction status. At the peak of construction on the program in 2009 to 2010, this monthly report was downloaded by hundreds of users every month. This level of reporting on a monthly basis was a first for the agency, and the report has been a model for transparent and accountable reporting for other ODOT projects. Our communications team also strategically pursued opportunities to gain recognition for ODOT's good work on the program. Over the course of the Bridge program, ODOT and its partners received 68 regional, national, and international awards. The awards highlight successes not only in design and construction, but also initiatives throughout the program, such as environmental stewardship, developing a diverse workforce, technology innovations, architectural preservation, and of course, communications and public involvement. So innovative projects and new ways of working meant that as communicators, we had many interesting stories to tell. Over the 10+ year life of the program, we generated a ton of original content. We made media relations a priority, placing stories and proactively pursuing coverage in local, state, and national outlets. Sharing knowledge with industry peers is an increasing ODOT priority. By identifying compelling stories, our team placed more than 800 articles about bridge program successes in local and national media and industry trade journals. All of this content meant we had a lot to draw on when we contemplated our options for communicating about program completion. And so it begins. Planning for our final reporting started when the program reached its midpoint, all the way back in 2009. Are there any questions so far?
I do not have any questions showing in my box, so I say
all
that's...
right. I'll keep going. We outlined our vision for a magazine-style report in a tactical communications plan for program completion efforts, which was a companion to our overall program communications plan. The plan included our objectives for communicating the successful completion of the bridge program. We identified our audiences, crafted our messages, and outlined a number of tactics. In addition to reporting, other tactics included developing a series of white papers, events, media outreach, awards opportunities, presentations, a website, and photos. The completion plan was updated and revised along the way as reporting needs and even the program itself changed. For example, the program end date extended by almost a year. And back in 2009, we had not yet envisioned how large a role the website would play in our magazine production. What we did know was that we wanted our end-of-program reporting to be as innovative and impactful as the rest of our communications. We also wanted it to be a lasting record, telling the story from a perspective that wouldn't feel old or dated in a year or two. Based on the objectives that we set in our communications plan, our aim was to document ODOT's philosophy of stewardship, meaning how the program was delivered, highlight key projects, and celebrate successes. Our approach then was to create a commemorative narrative, drawing from what would be a decade's worth of photos and content. Visuals would draw readers in through photos of scenic bridges, wildlife, construction sites, and the people who worked on the program. Engaging graphics would make data easily understandable. The design would feature a coordinated color scheme, and we would tell the story of the bridge program through its people, projects, and achievements. Our communications plan also detailed a tactic that was already underway informally to create a photo library to use for our final reporting and other needs. I really can't stress enough how much having a collection of quality photos to illustrate the program from beginning to end enabled us to produce the kind of magazine that we wanted. We were able to use ODOT's in-house photo video services photographers throughout the program. Booking these professionals for projects and events became a routine part of our planning. They also provided us with aerial shots of key projects, like the 8 bridge replacements in the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. And our largest project, the Willamette Passage Bridge in Eugene. We tapped into other resources for images as well, from within and outside ODOT. Construction contractors became a good source for us, and they learned over time what kinds of images worked best. Note the worker's hard hat in this image. Project inspectors who were on site on a regular basis provided us with detailed project images. More than 50% of the photos we ultimately selected for the magazine were of people. We collected scenic photos of our job sites from all regions of the state and in different seasons and conditions. And anything impressive, unusual, or unique was of course of interest, like images of night work. With photo collection ongoing, planning for the magazine content got underway in earnest about 2 years ahead of our printing deadline. So, are there any questions at this point?
You know what? We do have a couple questions. I have one actually myself. Curious, you mentioned that the construction contractors learned over time what you needed, and they provided a lot of photographs for you. Can you just comment quickly on whether you formally trained them, or is it because how did they get the idea, and how did they do in terms of providing high quality photos that were print worthy?
Sure. So generally the photos came from some of our higher profile projects. So we had people on site, communications folks would visit, we would sometimes do site tours. So we had good relationships with our contractors, and that enabled us to just tell them exactly what we needed. A couple of our big projects also had folks that had really quality cameras. Our inspectors especially are required to photograph things and record them, and so as cell phones have gotten better, the quality of photos has also increased. We asked them specifically to take photos of people and action shots, and so over the course of the years, they would see, we would tell them what we liked best, and they would accommodate.
That's great. So it's basically through relationship building and then just conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So Jason Wilkinson asks, can you comment on how many photos, videos, and infographics you generated over the course of this project?
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know exactly the number. I would have to look. I've got it stored somewhere, so I have to get back to you on the exact number, but it is, I would say it is probably thousands.
Yeah, I would believe that.
Yeah. Anything else?
Oh yes, sorry, I was on mute. Morgan Miller asks, going back to the media statistics slide that you showed earlier, what was the time frame that your figures covered? Was it the entire project or a specific duration? And that's where you have the 800 plus articles. Yes. I believe that's the slide it's referring to.
These statistics are for the entire life of the program. So it's about 11 years. That's the entire program length.
Okay, great. He also is curious, why were the majority of photos selected for the magazine of personnel? And is it DOT personnel or contracted employees or a combination? And actually, I know from looking at it, it's community members and that kind of thing.
Yes. We chose photos of people because for a couple reasons. One, the magazine was a recognition for the people who had done the work on the program, so we wanted to reflect that in our images. Also, photos of people draw readers in more than a lot of scenic shots. So it's, it gives a human face to what might otherwise be somewhat dry subject matter. And we did feature some DOT staff, but it was mostly contractors and workers and community members that were featured in our magazine.
Great, thanks. That's all we have, so you can continue when you're ready.
Okay. Great. So just to quickly recap this planning and developing the content, we started about 2 years ahead of our print deadline to really get the content going. Building the table of contents for the magazine began in the summer of 2012. As a team, we chose the signature stories to illustrate program successes and goal achievements. Our consultants drafted the initial list and developed the outline and the general order of stories, and then we met as a team and we made decisions collaboratively. Some pieces could be drafted well in advance, leaving time at the end to cover projects and events happening later in the program. For example, our award-winning environmental work was already completed at this time, so we were able to write and ultimately even design that part of the magazine sooner. However, the two largest and most complex projects would not be finished until very near the program's end, so those stories were written up as late as possible. So this is us. A few key folks are missing from this photo, namely Meredith, who was instrumental in tracking details as we neared our print deadline, and Lynn, our longtime graphic design consultant. We had a dedicated core team of DOT and consultant staff, and we worked collaboratively from start to finish. We were able to focus on strategic development, and our consultant partners brought an outside perspective and more broad audience engagement approaches. So we were a good team. Qualified and experienced staff filled key roles, and both our writer and designer had long-term program knowledge and familiarity with the content, which was a definite bonus. With so much happening concurrently on the design and content fronts, we created tools to organize the work and maintained clear lines of communication. A master schedule included deadlines and deliverables for all of the project pieces and production activities. We established protocols for reviews and approvals so that all feedback and corrections were accounted for. The magazine became a standing agenda topic for our team's monthly meetings, and we had status check-ins by phone as needed. Part of planning, we learned, is being flexible when required, and our plans adapted over time to accommodate changing program needs. While work on the magazine progressed, our team was also developing and producing the Bridge program's summary website, which had evolved into a digital version of an end-of-program report. Although not originally our vision, the magazine in turn became a print companion to the legacy website. This evolution led to designing the two projects essentially in tandem, maintaining the same look and feel and repurposing copy, images, and graphics from the magazine on the website and vice versa as much as possible. We also recognized along the way that the magazine would be a lasting keepsake for our program partners. It was important to highlight the contributions of consultants, contractors, key stakeholders, and participants, and thank them for their roles over the years in the program's successes. We decided to devote 2 full pages to acknowledge by name all of the program's design consultants and construction contractors. Later on, we distributed printed copies to key stakeholders along with a signed letter, thanking them for their contributions on behalf of the program. So with the table of contents locked in and writing in progress, attention turned to planning, design, and production. Now is when our photo library really came into play. We turned to our collection of images and selected the best ones to illustrate the story. Our photos became the building blocks for the design and layout. Together with our graphic designer, we used our chosen photos to guide our color palette, pulling colors from those images for the magazine's design features. Ultimately, our colors ranged from construction-themed oranges and yellows to asphalt grays and many shades of green, as is perhaps to be expected in a report that reflects Oregon. Part of our planning included a team brainstorming session to generate preferences about design treatments. We perused stacks of different kinds of magazines as a group and discussed things that we liked and didn't like to make our choices for things like size, paper weight, glossy versus matte, and so on. We gave samples of elements we liked to our graphic design consultant, and she incorporated our ideas into her design for our review and discussion later on. It was a team approach, and we had a very collaborative relationship with our designers throughout the process. Also, as a team, we reviewed options prepared by our designer and selected styles for headlines, subheads, body copy, pull quotes, and those kinds of elements. All those little details that really do make a difference. One of my favorite things about the magazine design is our data visualizations. We provided the information to our designer, and she created graphical illustrations of our program's results, data, numbers, and statistics. Whether alone, in pairs, or in a large grouping, as in this program summary, data visualizations add a ton of interest and they draw you in, much like an infographic, but simpler. They convey a lot of information in a really accessible way. We used this treatment extensively, peppered throughout the magazine. We were also able to leverage them on our website in presentations and later on as displays. A simple text box treatment can also be highly effective. What could easily get lost in regular copy pops when it's called out in this way. Again, it conveys a lot of information quickly and grabs the reader's interest. Note on this page the distribution of real estate. Most is given to the photo, then the call-outs, short headlines, and then a caption round out the page. Another approach for stories with a lot of stats and figures is to employ a by the numbers treatment. In this case, we had record-setting data about the largest beams ever made and installed in Oregon. Calling attention to all the numbers in a timeline effect across the bottom of a two-page spread adds interest and catches the reader's eye. Any questions at this point?
I do have one from Tony Jones. He's curious, going back to photos, which of course is always a big question, at least at the agency I work at. He'd like to know if there was a cost for images generated, or did contractors provide them to you at no cost? And also, were there clearances involved in use of the photos? For example, did you have to have people sign release agreements? Were there, attention to safety, et cetera, et cetera?
Right. Okay, yeah, really good question. I'll start at the end part first. Safety was huge. And there were a couple times where we had photos that we really wanted to use and we couldn't because for whatever reason the person maybe didn't have their safety glasses on or they weren't clipped in correctly. We actually missed one once, ran a photo on the cover of one of our monthly reports, and the guy wasn't wearing a hard hat or ear protection or something, and the guy got in big trouble, and the contractor got in trouble, and then we felt terrible, and it was good learning for all of us. So in terms of cost, there's no cost to us as ODOT employees for our ODOT photo video services photographers. That's built in to the agency cost. So we really relied on them probably the most. We did have to hire, sometimes we would hire a professional photographer if those guys weren't available, and there was a cost to that, and we just had to incorporate that into our program. Contractors did not charge us for photos because they were usually required to take them as part of their inspection stuff anyway. Sometimes contractors would use the photos they took in their own marketing materials. So they were willing to share with us, and we shared with them, and it was fine. So.
Did you have to have
releases? Yes.
Releases?
Some photos we did have to do releases. There were times, particularly when we took photos with our schools programs, any photos of children, they needed to have releases. So we would use a standard, the agency has a standard form for that, and we would have to get a signed release for each person who was identifiable in the photo that had children in it. There were also times when contractors made us do that. Just simply, they were maybe a little uncomfortable having us take pictures of their workers. But in general, unless it was at public meetings, if we took photos at public meetings, we would have an announcement, sort of a general announcement saying we were taking pictures, and if anybody was uncomfortable with that, to come talk to us. So generally, that was how we handled it.
That's really interesting. And can you tell me just briefly what management system you use for photos? I mean, if you've got thousands of photos, how did you keep track, and did you use keywords, and is there a certain platform you used in order, because it's a lot of photos to manage.
Yeah,
So I know how
yeah, it is. It is. That was one of the awesome things about having consultant contractor. They managed our photo library for the most part. We used FileNet, and we had a naming convention that was established for the program, and so every photo was named a certain way, and we used all of our projects had what we called a bundle number, and so they were identified by bundle, and they were stored with that particular project. So we would have, within a bundle 212, for example, we would have a folder that would be bundle 212 photos, and then they had a naming convention. But yeah, it's a gigantic library, and it was managed. We do have it saved now at the agency in FileNet.
Interesting, the bundling, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And Jasmine, well, I've got two other questions. Wow. Let's see. Fred Donodio would like to know, did you and your team get frustrated with the time it took to establish all the graphic rules and requirements? He also asked, how did you decide when to just move on? And also, how much of your day did you devote to this project while it was happening?
Let's see. So how much of our day did we devote to this? I mean, it was sort of an ongoing project over a number of years, and we had a lot of concurrent things going on. In addition, we were doing our normal communications work, public involvement work. We had our two biggest projects still underway at the same time. So yeah, it was just, I think we were too busy to get frustrated. I don't know if I could give an exact time amount of days we spent on it. I mean, overall, I think we estimated that the total time spent on the magazine was about 950 hours. Okay. Again, that was spread out over a number of years. We started the planning for it in 2009. We sent it to the printer in 2015. So.
Gosh, well, and I know it probably went up and down, but did you think this was like a quarter of your FTE or a half of your FTE?
I'm not sure. At the end, for sure, it was definitely taking over our lives. Yeah.
Okay, so it's just a part of your FTE, though, for most of it.
Yes, pretty good part. Right. What was the other? Could you remind me of the other questions?
How did you decide when it was about getting frustrated with the time it took to establish all the graphic rules and requirements, and how did you decide when to just move
on? I'm not sure I understand the question, but in terms of the little infographics and stuff, we basically, our team designed, we pulled out numbers and things that we wanted to highlight, and just provided it in a Word file to our graphic designer, and just let her play with it and run with it. Her creative mind kind of came up with all the little graphics, and then the color scheme was already decided by our publications color scheme. So, I mean, we made adjustments as we went along. We changed images, that kind of thing, but it wasn't any more frustrating than anything else we were working on, I guess. And then, yeah, knowing when to just call it a day, the ultimate motivation is the deadline. I mean, we had to get it to the printer by a certain date, and at some point, you're right, you just have to kind of call it good and move on. Right. So, yeah.
Okay. Jasmine Jackson is asking, Does the color scheme and branding coincide with ODOT's standard branding at all, and if not, why?
Generally, yes. Blues and greens are kind of the standard ODOT colors, and then there's a lot of orange, obviously, for construction cone color. But the interesting thing, the template I'm using for the presentation today was actually developed by our bridge program, and it's now ODOT's standard presentation template for all presentations. So we took the themes that ODOT already had, and I think they were well received, and so they've kind of taken over the agency as a whole. If that makes sense.
They didn't use their usual, but it certainly dovetailed with the standard branding.
Exactly.
Gotcha. John Verico asks, would you be willing to share your release form? He says, we're always looking for good release form language.
Yeah, I can totally do that. I'll check it. We just have, it's standard on our website. I will, yes.
Thanks. I've got some other questions. Kelly Boulware asks, what was the role of your senior managers in the process for approvals, etc., and how did you gain agency-wide buy-in?
Well, I think that was one of the ways that we did that was, I mean, we were an established program. This was kind of the jewel in the crown for ODOT. Our director was involved, and I mean, we were kind of seen as a shining example at this point. And so that gave us leeway, and they wanted to publicize it. They wanted to talk about the good works. I mean, there were many times where when they would have to testify in front of our legislative committees, they would draw things from the bridge program as examples of successful delivery, and not necessarily communications, but obviously we helped them to tell that message, and that helped the agency with its oversight bodies. So our senior management played a role in, as I'll touch on later when I get to some of the key takeaways. There were times where budget would become an issue or whatever, and there'd be, they'd want to cut, and so they'd say, well, maybe you guys don't need to do this magazine, you can just do something, whatever. And my boss, who was the head of the bridge program, said he wanted to finish strong. That was our mantra, finish strong. You don't want to have done this big program for 10 years and then just sort of go out with a whimper, so we had management support, and that was, we felt really lucky.
Great. Morgan Miller is asking, was there a social media aspect to your communication strategy?
Yes, we had a large social media strategy. The thing was that when this started, ODOT didn't have social media. We didn't do anything. We had a website, and that was it. So the bridge program we even had the first listserv. I don't know if we can take credit for it or if it's just the fact that, times changed and people are more comfortable, but we kind of were the testing ground for a lot of things. We had the first blog, first Twitter post, first video, all of the firsts for ODOT. And then based on that, other people started doing it. And now we have a very robust, we got a Facebook page and all kinds of stuff. So maybe it was just the times, but I think we were definitely the guinea pigs first out of the gate to try stuff out.
Great. Let's see. John Verico asks, could you please spend another moment on how you determined who your target audience was and how you knew what they would want?
Well, our target audience was our partners, program partners, so the folks who had worked on the program, both internal and external. So the ODOT staff throughout the state, throughout our ODOT offices who had worked on the program, we wanted to provide them with this keepsake and thank you and sort of, just something to keep. Mostly, most end reports will end up being, on a shelf. We do have a report that has all the, start dates and end dates of every single project, and what the budget was for every project and what the schedule was, but that wasn't the intent of this particular magazine. We wanted it to be something else. We started off by calling it kind of jokingly the coffee table book, and that's sort of the direction that we had in our mind when we started producing it. We wanted it to be this beautiful narrative piece that you would like to set out and thumb through. So we looked at our legislators, our commission, director's office. Those were the audience for this particular magazine. Other pieces were more public facing, but this one was a little more internal and oversight, if that makes sense.
And you told me you've actually seen it sitting on people's desks and set
out. Yes, I have.
For...
Yep, that's true. Just last week, I was in the communications director's office, and this magazine was sitting on his desk, and I commented on it, and he said that the director had been looking at it as an example of what to do for another big transportation project that's wrapping up.
Okay, I actually have some questions, but I'm going to hold off because we're coming up on the end of our time. So why don't you go ahead with planning for the home stretch?
Okay, great. Okay, so with the goal in sight, our focus now was on finishing strong, ensuring accuracy through reviews and proofing, making any final changes, sending the finished product for printing, and coordinating distribution. In addition to reviews and proofreading by our communications team, we reached out to nearly 30 expert reviewers from inside and outside the department, including prime contractors, consultants, and others associated with the featured stories. For most reviewers, we sent them a PDF of the story or stories in their area of expertise and asked them to flag any factual errors. For a select few, we made a rather big ask to read the magazine in its entirety, front to back, and provide feedback on a larger scale. We wanted to be sure that the magazine did indeed read like a story. The feedback from these reviews resulted in a number of valuable edits and corrections. Almost all reviewers suggested a change or two, or pointed out a fact to add, double check, or remove. One reviewer noticed the omission of our consultant partners' logos, an unintended oversight that we were happy to accommodate. Big picture readers gave us suggestions about flow and identified places where the copy could be tightened up. Incorporating all of this input improved our end product, and we were grateful for the feedback. As the countdown to our print deadline approached, we learned that all those last-minute details take time. Build in wiggle room in your schedule, because you will need it as you incorporate edits and proof corrections. But taking the time to get it right is definitely time well spent. We limited our print run to 1,000 copies to keep costs down and made the magazine available online as a printable PDF through the Legacy website. The first copies were presented to our Oregon Transportation Commissioners, ODOT Director, agency executives, and Bridge Program Management, following our final presentation to the Commission. My team then coordinated distribution of nearly 600 copies, first internally to ODOT regions and offices that had participated in the program, and then externally to our program partners. Now for a few key takeaways. As some of you no doubt have experienced, communications is often the first option for the chopping block when a project's budget or resources need to be tightened. This is especially true as projects wrap up and budgets get smaller. Having a clear plan that gains the support of leadership and a well-managed budget allowed us to weather a few storms and continue to publish as planned. So plan for communicating the end of your project from the beginning. Include final reporting in your initial communications plan. Budget for resources and production needs for end-of-program communications, be that a traditional report, a magazine-style publication, or a website, or all three, as was in our case. As I said earlier, make photo gathering a priority from the start. Involving your publication's audience in the review process has multiple benefits. Most obviously and importantly, it improves accuracy. For us, subject matter experts confirmed the details. Conversely, readers who were not as familiar with the program, or as close to it as our team was, came to the content with a really fresh eye. People felt honored to be asked to provide their input, which was a bit of a surprise for us, actually. It showed them that their knowledge and opinions were appreciated. Inviting our readers to participate in the process created goodwill and built anticipation for the final product. Our response rate was high, and the thoughtful feedback we received improved our product. You can take advantage of the benefits and limitations of various platforms by coordinating and repurposing your content. For example, longer narratives worked well in the magazine, whereas the website used an interactive map interface to present short stories along with more program and project data. We saved time and resources by repurposing our content. By editing stories that had already been written for the magazine, we then used them on the website. The data visualizations that had already been developed for the website were used in the magazine, which saved us money on graphic design. Consistency in look and feel across platforms reinforces your branding and gives your material that package quality. We use the same color scheme, fonts, and general style for both magazine and website. And telling your story in different venues on multiple platforms allows you to reach a broader audience, regardless of where or how they come to your content. And with that, we've reached the end of my talk. So I want to thank you so much for your interest and all the great questions, and I'm happy to take more at this point.
Terrific. And before we finish with questions, I'd just like to encourage everyone to go out to the website and see this document. I think we've gotten some nice teasers from it and the beautiful photography that you've shown us, some of the graphics we've seen, the color schemes, etc. As a government communication, this is definitely a best practice, a best-in-class piece, and just by looking through it, you can learn a lot about, we didn't even touch on writing quality, story selection, etc. It is really a fantastic piece and just beautifully put together. We do have a couple of final questions and a comment actually from Fred Donadio. He said you rephrased his question about frustration perfectly. Thank you. He was really asking more about fonts and colors overall. Hold on, let me get down here. John Verico asks, with your social media engagement specific to the magazine, can you just comment quickly on if you promoted the magazine through social medias or specific features? Like, did the magazine and social media coincide?
Okay, so the website actually launched before the magazine did, by a couple months, I believe. And we promoted the website extensively. We added the magazine as a link after the website was already up. So we promoted the website, like I said, a lot more than we did the magazine, mostly because the website is a public-facing thing, and the magazine, while it's fine for public, and that wasn't our. I don't think that's the first audience. So was your website part of the final product package that you did? It's not. It wasn't an ongoing website. Right. It was right. We had an ongoing website where we had, that we updated all the time, and that has since gone away, and that's why we called this the legacy website, because it's sort of a standalone, encapsulated thing for the program, and it won't change going forward. Sure. So we did publicize the magazine inside the agency to our employee newsletter. We sent a link out via Gov delivery to all of our program stakeholders, letting them know and including a link to the PDF. I should point out, if you go to the website, the OTAbridge.org, on the left, top bar on the left, there's an OTA logo. If you click on that, you'll see a drop-down that says Leaving a Legacy. That's the magazine. Great, thanks. And yeah, that's actually really interesting to know. I hadn't understood necessarily that the website was also an end project piece. So Yep.
these two things together. So the website's public-facing end of project wrap-up, and the magazine was internally facing. Really
Primarily,
interesting.
yes. Internal and key stakeholders, yes.
Yeah, that's excellent. Let's see, Jasmine Jackson again says, can you explain to us again who the big picture readers were? I mean, when you said the people that did the big picture read, who are you referring to for that?
So a couple of people, we asked some of our, we had a program management team, and I had a counterpart who had been on the program but was on the consultant side. He'd been on the program the entire time, just like I had. So he had that overall knowledge, but had not been on the program for a few years. And so he was one of our readers. I asked my husband to read it from beginning to end, because he, he didn't know much about the program other than what he heard from me talking about at home. So that kind of thing. People that I trusted that were, smart, good, and I knew that could give us good feedback. And also, people that I had to, bribe with cookies or donuts or whatever.
Great. So that was really the cookies they appreciated.
Of course.
Right. Okay. Excellent. I mean, that's the end of the questions we've had from the audience. Fred Donadio would like to also say in caps, thank you very much. And I would say that too. This has been a really interesting discussion, wonderful presentation of a fantastic project. We really appreciate the time you've taken in putting it together, which I know was extensive, and appreciate your taking the time to join us today. So there's no further questions. Hello, NAGC. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you in May to learn about that guy, that girl. We'll be sending that information out soon. Hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon and rest of the morning, and take a break for lunch, and enjoy the beautiful weather. Thank you very much, Karen Jones-Jackley. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you.